Thank you. In fragment 1 of The Voice of the Silence, a Theosophical classic on the spiritual life, we read, "Kill out desire, but if thou killst it, take heed, lest from the dead it should again arise." But had we no desire, we wouldn't do anything, would we? We'd be the living dead. Surely this is not what the Voice of the Silence is telling us to do. So before we get to the heart of the matter, which is desire and spiritual selfishness, I think it would be helpful to take a look at our complex human nature, just briefly, and from a theosophical perspective. Theosophically speaking, it is said that within each one of us, and I think we can verify this for ourselves, not just believe the statement or reject the statement. Within each one of us, there is a witness, that which can observe your body. It can be aware of your emotions. It can be aware of your mind. And indeed, thousands, though in the minority, know that witness can be aware that it inheres in the eternal. It is said theosophically that that witness, consciousness itself, is the only truly eternal aspect, and even the word aspect is incorrect, of us. Though other aspects of us endure, allegedly, for many incarnations. Now, it is said that there are 7 major aspects of the human being. This witness, our body, mind, emotions, and others. We'll deal mainly tonight with mind and emotions, and to some extent, the body. Now, each of these aspects of our nature, perhaps other than the physical body and that eternal witness, is in the nature of a field. I think most of you, if not all of you, know that fields are non-material in character. Every scientist admits this. I read a pamphlet by Henry Margenau of Yale once, who was so well respected. He was one of our scientists sent over to the Soviet Union in exchange. And he called it the non-material reality. We know fields exist only by the way matter behaves in those fields. Otherwise, we wouldn't know they were there. Right now, television waves, radio waves are in this room. We're not aware of them. Therefore, they don't exist. Of course they exist, but you have to have the right instrument to pick them up, don't you? So each of these fields might be thought of as a localization within a universal field. As we know, all of us get this in high school science, the gravitational field of the Earth is a localization of a universal gravitational field. Isn't that true? I hope that's still true. I know very little science, so I'm very careful about what I say. I check with my wife, who knows a lot more than me. So I try to say only what's safe. But I think that's safe. So each of these fields is associated with a kind of matter that responds to that field. Very simple example is a bar magnet. You put iron filings on a page, you put a bar magnet underneath. What happens to the iron filings? They line up along the lines of invisible, non-material force, don't they? So we know that field responds, that iron responds to that field. Our bodies probably respond in some not measurable way, but we can't tell that necessarily. Maybe there's some way of finding that out now, but it doesn't respond so well as iron, you see. It needs appropriate test objects. One of my mentors used to call this substance that responds to the field. Now we have other fields. For example, there's one called in Sanskrit the linga sharira. but we don't need the Sanskrit this time. Sometimes we need the Sanskrit because there's no English word. Whenever I use Sanskrit, either in my book or in my talks, I say what it means first, not just give you a word that means something in Finnish or Sanskrit. We can say the etheric double or the vital body. And that's in the nature of a force field, theoretically at least. It's said that that force field occurs first in the womb of the mother. And around that field accretes, you might say, the substance, the protoplasm, that becomes the physical human being, just like those iron filings lined up along the force field, lines of the force of the magnet, you see. But the etheric double is a dynamic field, constantly changing, constantly moving, whereas the bar magnet is static, isn't it? It doesn't go anywhere unless it gets moved around. Now, there is some fascinating evidence about the possible existence of the etheric double, linga sharira, or vital body, whatever term one wishes to use. And that is in the egg of a chicken. When the chick begins to form inside of the egg, there is a pulsation that occurs right where the heart will be formed. In other words, the heart is beating before there's a heart. What is doing that? We say it's the etheric double or the vital body first formed before the physical body, and it is pulsing as if we took the iron magnet, the filings, and did this to them. The pulsing is going on inside, and that creates or forms the chick. Isn't that extraordinary? There's some evidence for you. I like evidence. I don't use the word proof. I use evidence. Suggestive evidence. So we know something about that. Now, there are other fields, emotional, it is said, mental, spiritual. And these, according to Theosophical philosophy, are associated with a kind of matter that responds to that field, just as protoplasm responds to the etheric double. Iron filings respond to the electromagnetic field. It is said that there is a matter, but not physical matter, matter so rarefied, so fine, that it is impossible to detect it with physical instruments because it's not physical, and yet it's substance. So a clairvoyant, whether they're a bit, as we say in New York, mashugana, crazy, or not, sees an aura. What they're seeing is the matter associated with your emotional nature and your mental nature. Now, don't pay attention often to what they say it means, because they may be totally wrong. But they're seeing something, aren't they? They're not seeing nothing. Of course, some of them are just hallucinating, but nonetheless, some of you knew Dora Kuntz. I mentioned her in my book. She was a dear friend for well over 40 years, and me being a realist bordering on a cynic, she was the only clairvoyant I was quite sure I could trust, because she had a 98% track record diagnosing disease. Absolutely extraordinary. What she saw was the energy, the matter, the substance that she didn't see the physical organ of the liver, say. She saw the, what we call prana, or the inner energy. She could see energy, matter is equivalent, I believe, according to Einstein, right? So she saw that, not the field. No man has seen God at any time. So she didn't see the field. So theoretically, all of these fields affect the physical body in some way. And any action in any one of those fields affects the whole in some way, theoretically. Perhaps that is because, from a theosophical perspective, there is really only one unified field, acting in different ways on 7 different states of substance or matter. And it is quite possible, I suspect it's true, but I have no proof of it, it is quite possible that that ultimate unified field is consciousness itself. Not the objects of consciousness, not what we're conscious of, the consciousness itself. Now, a powerful component of the emotional field is what is called in Sanskrit kama, not karma, K-A-M-A, kama, and that's loosely translated as desire, and as is usually the case, translating words from one language to another, especially such a language as Sanskrit, leaves a lot to be desired. So it's a little bit inadequate with the English translation, but it is essentially our emotional nature. It includes, but not limited to, craving and desire of any kind. We may crave physical sensation. We may crave food, drink, companionship, prestige. I want, I crave, I need prestige. I need to be recognized. Power, a soulmate. So many lonely people looking for a soulmate. If we want a friend, we have to be a friend. We can't find friends. We may even crave fine art and music. Now, it's the attachment to the objects of desire which create the problem, not the appreciation of the objects. To enjoy fine art and music is not the same as craving fine art and music. In fact, in one of the Mahatma letters, a classical theosophical document, a good-sized book, when the letters were all printed out, in one of those letters, the adept says, quote, "Music is the most divine and spiritual of arts," end quote. So it's not the appreciation of music that is the problem, it's the I can't live without the music that is the problem. This too shall pass away, has no exceptions. So if we can't hear our music when we want to hear our music, can we accept it? By all means, play it whenever we can. So if we're attached to anything, even identified with it, psychological pain is inevitable when it changes. Do you see that? It's obvious, isn't it? If I'm attached to something, anything, a person, an idea, I don't care what it is, it's going to change. And if I'm attached to it, it hurts. This is not new with Ed Abdill. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, enunciated the basic principle, this basic principle, over 2,500 years ago, and Freud, the great psychologist, called the Buddha the greatest psychologist who ever lived. And he was right. Now, in directing us to kill out desire, the voice of the silence is not asking us to kill out emotion. If you read the Mahatma letters, you'll discover that Kutumi and Maurya, who wrote most of those letters, are not cold, emotionless people. Boy, they have strong feelings about things. It comes out in their letters. In letter number 92, Kutumi reports that Blavatsky's glowing description of Maurya as an Apollo of Belvedere caused him to, quote, start in anger and break his pipe while swearing. And since Kutumi had lived in Europe for a while and knew many, many Christians, and many, many Christians, like every other religion, are full of human faults, he said it, he actually added, he said, would start in anger and break his pipe while swearing like a true Christian. Now, he was not denigrating Christianity. In addition to our emotions, of course, we have a mind. And we know the difference between the two, although I don't think we can separate them in experience. So that mind is said theosophically to be the human soul, that which endures from one incarnation to another. Not every aspect of the mind, but that aspect of mind that can know, that can get a flash of understanding. One could go on and on about all of this, but we need to zero in on the main point, and that's, I think, sufficient for that. Now, that mind that we are, or have, however you wish to look at it, can focus on the spiritual nature and become identified with it. That's a possibility, seldom used by the bulk of humanity. Mostly, that mind identifies with our thinking, feeling nature and our physical body. He hurt me. Really? Me? Who's me? My emotions. Is that all of me? No. But it's part of me, and it hurt. So this thinking, feeling nature and the body together, our thoughts, our feelings, our physical sensations, are me. But it is, according to theosophical theory and according to experience of thousands of people, me only one among them, that's not the whole of it. There is something far more profound within you, a state of consciousness which can be realized and can be known to be part of a greater whole. Now, human selfishness is directly related to this me, the feeling, thinking nature. If we try to get what we want for me, regardless of what's best for others, we're selfish. It's obvious. Ordinary selfishness is easy to detect. No doubt we all have a little bit of it, if we're honest. But while ordinary selfishness is deplorable, it is far less dangerous than spiritual selfishness. In chronological letter number 64 of the Mahatma letters, Kutumi describes this more dangerous selfishness. He writes, "There are persons who, without ever showing any external sign of selfishness, are intensely selfish in their inner spiritual aspirations. These will follow the path once chosen by them with their eyes closed to the interests of all but themselves, and see nothing outside the narrow pathway filled with their own personality. They are so intensely absorbed in the contemplation of their own supposed righteousness that nothing can ever appear right to them outside the focus of their own vision and their judgment of the right and wrong. I know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God." These people, if they believe that in order to come to bliss, to freedom, to nirvana, to heaven, to freedom from all suffering, if they believe that to do that they need to give all of their goods to the poor, they'll do it in a flash, but they'll do it for me, not for you or anyone else, because they don't give a darn about anybody but themselves. At first glance, the relationship between kama, or desire, and spiritual selfishness may not be clear. But if we observe ourselves as objectively as possible, we may discover a link between the two. So passing over some of the most obvious forms of desire and selfishness, we might consider some of the more subtle ones, and later perhaps identify this link between the two. Desire of one sort or another is present in animals, clearly. We would say even plants, but we'd get knocked down on that rather quickly. But I think desire is pretty clear in the animals. and certainly in human beings. It's part of nature. It's not wrong. It's a universal. Nothing that's universal, I think, could be wrong. At least that's the way I look at it. Kama, or desire, propels us to act, doesn't it? As I said before, if we didn't want to do anything, we wouldn't. We'd just sit there and atrophy. So we've got to have to want to do something. When we act, we get reaction, don't we? I think I'm doing just the right thing, and suddenly, boy, do I find out I made a mistake. Whoops, I shouldn't have done that. Because you get the reaction, don't you? And theoretically, again, if you don't get it in this life, you get it in the next. But action-reaction is a law of nature at every state of being, I should suggest. Not just physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, action-reaction. So acting produces results. Results, we can learn from those results. And it goes on like that. Now, some people, especially in movements such as the Theosophical movement or in Hinduism, perhaps, I think misunderstand this idea of action. They and karma, they feel, I've heard it said, oh, I don't want to help so-and-so because that's their karma, and I don't want to interfere with their karma. Now, there's a wimp for you. One of the sages has told us, inaction in a deed of mercy is action in a deadly sin. It's our identification with the desires and our attachment to the objects of desires which cause the problem. Now, I'll give you a little hypothetical example. Let's say we've planned our day. We all plan our day, whatever our day happens to be, don't we? I think everyone does to some extent. We want to finish our work on time. We want to feel we did a good job. We want to feel everything went like we want it to go. But, as Robbie Burns, the Scottish poet, said, now I have to say it in English because he said it in broad Scots, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. He wrote that poem when he was plowing a field, and he upturned the nest of a mouse. And he felt very sorry for the mouse. Her plans and his often go awry. When they go awry, we're likely to get upset, aren't we? Our desire has been blocked. We didn't get what we want. We're attached to our plans. Now, this doesn't mean we shouldn't act. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have plans. It's foolish, as I said before, to say not to do anything. But if our plans are blocked, something happens and they don't go through, can we accept it even if we're not happy about it? We don't have to be happy about it and say, oh, good, my plans all went astray. No, you're not happy. But can you just say, okay, now what? What do we do now? What's next? I have a friend who had some very, very serious problems, unknown to me for a while, and when I found out about them, he said to me, I know you don't judge people. You once told me that if I killed my grandmother, you'd say, well, I don't approve, but what do we do now? That's the next question, isn't it? What do we do now? It's ruined, the plan's gone, now what do we do? If we can't do that, we're attached. Another wise person, I got it from a prominent theosophist of the 20th century, early 20th century, but I don't know as he was the original one to say it. Few things matter much. Most things don't matter at all. I told a very amusing story about this. I think I put it in the book, actually, about a little boy who wouldn't eat his prunes, and some of you know the story. And his mother said, "You've been very naughty not eating your prunes. There are people who are dying and starving, and you're wasting food. And now you're to go to your room for the rest of the evening. No television, no playing. That's it for the evening. And God will punish you for not eating your prunes." Well, about an hour later, a tremendous electrical storm hit. And the mother thought, "Oh, Lord, I never should have told him that. He'll think God is punishing him." And she ran up the steps, went into his room, and there he was looking out the window with his hands on his hips saying, "Such a fuss for 2 prunes." So the next time you're very upset, maybe it's 2 prunes. Whenever we feel angry, upset, fearful, anxious, frustrated, we are reacting to blocked desire. Anger and fear are responses to a threat of some kind. Kama, or desire, is not only desire to possess something. You may want to possess a lover, but you want to get rid of an enemy. It's the other side of desire. Desire to get rid of as opposed to the desire to take in. So minor flare-ups of kama or desire happen so often that we're basically unaware of it during the day. The little things. The big things you're aware of. The little things you aren't. I believe in the prophet, Gibran said, "In the dew of little things the heart finds its morning and is refreshed. But in the sourness of little things it's the reverse." So it has a tremendous influence on our happiness and the happiness of people around us. And we're often unaware of it. Examples abound: stuck in a traffic jam, flight delays, jostled by crowds, loss of personal property, disruption of our daily routine provide opportunities to see this. There's a wonderful Zen saying I came upon not long ago that sort of sums it up in a way about this craving nature and not having to do it, and yet the practical side of things having to be taken care of. And the expression is this: there is really nothing you must be, and there is nothing you must do. There is really nothing you must have, and there is nothing you must know. There is really nothing you must become. However, it helps to understand that fire burns, and when it rains, the earth gets wet. Isn't that wonderful? A whole lecture in that little bit of saying, acknowledging the practical side of life and dismissing the need for craving. Perhaps the most difficult attachment for us to avoid is the attachment to those we love. Like many of you, I love my spouse very dearly, but I regret to say I'm also attached. She always says, "I'm glad." True love goes out with personal hooks, doesn't it? Pure love, which few of us have, if any. Attachment is when we want to keep someone or something exactly as they are for our emotional comfort. If we love a person or a friend without attachment, we can let them go. We may not like it, but we can let them go. Sometimes it's right for someone to die. We need to accept that and to let them go. Death is natural. It's inevitable. We all experience it, and we all lose someone we love or a pet we love. I'm not saying it's not painful. Our grief, which is natural among us and almost universal among us, is evidence that in addition to our love, we've become attached to having their physical presence with us. Now, does non-attachment mean we shouldn't plan? Of course not. Planning for one's future is common sense. Death, as I mentioned, is the greatest change of all. It would be foolish to ignore it. Be a good idea to make a will. Be a good idea to decide what should happen to your property before you die. You're going to die. You can plan for it. You can plan for a lot of other things. They may not always work out, although death is sure to work out. But planning is sensible, isn't it? Now, some might say we're all attached to our desires. That's the nature of the human being. We all get attached, can't do anything about it. Almost always when you hear can't do anything about it, it's not right. You can. So rather than accept this idea that there is something we can do about it or reject it, we might think for a minute about what sages have called the eternal now. And then we can maybe look at our own experience. Early in the Secret Doctrine we read, "Time was not, for it lay asleep in the infinite bosom of duration." I find that exquisite. Something to ponder. Profound statement. Curiously, modern physics just about agrees. There was no time before the Big Bang. That seems impossible to us, doesn't it? We're so rooted in this idea of time. But what we call time, at least theoretically, is our experience of motion. Cycles, ordered motion. Motion is real. It's said to be eternal. And cycles are ordered motion, aren't they? So there's order there somewhere. In one of the Mahatma letters, number 15, Kutumi writes, quote, "Past, present, and future, miserable concepts of the objective phases of the subjective whole, they are about as ill-adapted for the purpose as an axe for fine carving." He had a way with words. Much different than Maurya, who was very abrupt. Somewhere in the letters, not the Mahatma letters to Synod, I don't think, but elsewhere, I remember reading one. He responded to someone and basically said this. I don't have the words exactly right, but I have more or less the tone of it. "Got your note, we'll answer it, Maurya." Man of a few words. Now, what about this eternal now? There isn't any past, is there? Where is the past? It doesn't exist, does it? This is the past. This is the past. And the past exists in my memory. Now. Here. Right here, now. Not somewhere where it doesn't exist anymore. So the past is now, in memory or in what's here. The future is not yet. There isn't any such thing. This isn't so easy to grasp, but if you ponder it, I think you will. The future is the potential that's here now. We can change that potential. Driving a car, I think I mentioned this in some article, I don't remember which one. Driving a car at 60 miles an hour, police have set up a roadblock to prevent the automobiles and trucks from going over a bridge that's been washed out. Well, right at that moment, the possibility is that you drive through it and go into the river. But you change that potential by putting on the brakes. You see? So simple as that. The adepts, that is, those extraordinary individuals who taught Blavatsky and who wrote those letters, claim that they are working all the time to change the future. But the future is not yet. They're trying, at least from my understanding of what they say, they're trying to influence human minds and the ideas and the intentions of the human race. They're trying to influence that and sort of bring it into a more harmonious, universal compassion sort of thing. So they're not working on some non-existent future, they're working on the potential now, here. Now, from a scientific point of view as well as a theosophical view, everything in the objective world and the subjective world from a theosophical view is moving, and movement equates to change. Nothing stays the same for a nanosecond. When we have what we want, we're happy. As a friend of mine said, contentment does not breed change. Don't want to do anything when I'm happy. Allegedly, the Chinese once said, pain makes man think. Thinking makes man wise. Wisdom makes life endurable. Wish it weren't true, but it is. We learn when we're challenged. If we just twirled batons and played football all of our lives, our mind wouldn't do much, would it? Now, I'm not saying baton twirlers and football players can't be brilliant, but they can only develop their mind by using it against something that opposes. A challenge, a mental challenge, an obstacle, a physical problem in the sports or whatever. We don't want to change when we're happy, but we can no more stop things from changing than we can stop the earth spinning on its axis. It's inevitable. Our desire to keep things as they are and the impossibility of doing so produces psychological pain. Sages have told us that if we avoid becoming attached to the objects of our desire, it's possible to enjoy life to its fullest. I think Blavatsky once said something along the lines, if we centered our attention, focused our consciousness on the inner self, we would soon escape the coils of the great serpent of delusion, and we would find that life was worth living even in its worst phases. So learning to focus very deep within, where there is a consciousness that's at one with the whole, is perhaps the secret. She also said, Blavatsky, that a theosophist should have a deep appreciation of the sensate world, but a calm indifference to it. The indifference to the sensate would be our complete acceptance of constant change. The appreciation of the sensate would be our joy. Some people in my life that I regard as very deeply spiritual people, not anything like the stereotype saint, quite far from it, as a matter of fact, they were able to appreciate things like a little child, and when they were gone, it was fine. No problem. That, to me, is a spiritual ability. So, to be able to accept change and yet to find life joyful, it might be helpful to get some sense of what Kuthumi calls the subjective whole. There is no doubt in my mind, because it's my experience, and I am in no way unique, thousands if not millions have had the experience. There is no doubt in my mind that we can, at least momentarily in meditation, realize there's no me, no time, only the eternal. It comes in a flash, and it's transformative. It's what a Zen master called a fleeting forever, beautiful and accurate in every way. Because in the nanosecond of the flash, there is only eternity. And then brain consciousness wants to say, I've got it, and you don't. Because then there's duality, I and it. So those flashes of insight into the eternal background, if we have those, it becomes easier to accept and enjoy the changing foreground. This is not easy. It may be the most difficult thing we human beings ever have to do. In fact, in the Mahatma letters, they say that even after getting this glimpse, it takes not weeks or months or years, but lifetimes to achieve the final goal. Give yourself a little time. patience is a virtue that is lacking in our modern society. I had a friend who said he had a first grade teacher who said, "Patience is a virtue, possess it if you can." So we have those flashes, but we slip back. This witness, this consciousness, can focus anywhere, can focus in our big toe, can focus on our emotions, can be identified with our body, identified with our emotions, can focus in our mind, can focus on this inner reality. But we slip back to the ordinary brain consciousness so easily. It's inertia almost. It's habitual. So we fall back to it. But if we've had that flash, we never forget it. No one can take it away from you. We can easily deceive ourselves, however. In one episode of a comic strip called Agnes, my wife is addicted to comic strips. In fact, she's going to do a program out here in the summer on Theosophy and the comic strips. We find Agnes at school. Her teacher asks for the assignment, the homework assignment, but Agnes doesn't have it. Agnes says to herself, "I'm enjoying every moment, I'm living in the now, everything is just fine, and it doesn't matter one whit that I don't have my homework assignment." But when the teacher requires her to stay after school to finish the assignment, Agnes decides her moment of joy are turning sour. Agnes has deceived herself, as we often do. So having touched on the problem of personal desire and personal selfishness, we may look a little more closely at this idea of spiritual selfishness, which seems an oxymoron. In The Voice of the Silence, again, that line about, "If you kill desire, take heed lest it should arise again from the dead," it refers to killing ordinary selfish desire only to have it reincarnate as spiritual or inner selfish desire, inner spiritual desire. Now that's not the same as spiritual will. The will is necessary to spiritual development. In one of the letters, again, K.H. wrote, we are directed to have, quote, "an iron, never failing determination, and yet be meek and humble, and have shut out from the heart every human passion that leads to evil." And he added to the recipient of the letter, "Are you all this?" Well, no, not yet. The human passion is both the personal desires and the personal selfishness, and also the spiritual selfish desire. Now, one sign of this spiritual selfishness is the desire to acquire spiritual knowledge and power for oneself. I mentioned that earlier this evening. So if the desire for personal knowledge and personal enlightenment is so strong that it prevents us from fulfilling our responsibilities, we've fallen victim to spiritual selfishness. In extreme cases, a parent may neglect a child in order to visit a guru or attend a religious service or, gasp, a theosophical meeting. Among theosophists, we trust that such cases are rare, yet less extreme cases are common. We may consider some cases from member meetings of the Theosophical Society. For example, some members of the Society might insist that meetings contain information helpful to them, while ignoring the needs of others. Their unstated, subconscious desire is, "I know what we need to do to make our meetings more spiritually useful, and I intend to override the views of everybody else in order to get what I want." We've all seen this. Names are not permitted. And gasp, maybe it's me. Many of us participate in group discussions, but sometimes the desire to get our view across is so strong we monopolize the meeting. There's where you need a strong chairperson. And usually they're not aware of it. I'm a talker. You all know that. Sounds Southern, right, Betty? Y'all know that. So I try to be very careful not to monopolize the meeting, because when I'm talking, it seems very short time. When you're talking, it seems very long. Watch it. I think you'll see it happening. You talkers among us. You listeners know it already, don't you? So we become oblivious to the time we're taking and to the fact that we're keeping others from participating equally. Now, not every member of the Theosophical Society can attend meetings. In fact, some members have responsibilities that keep them from attending meetings. Going to a meeting rather than carrying out their responsibilities would be an example of spiritual selfishness. Some members support the society by their dues and their goodwill, and they have no interest or time to support it actively. That's just fine. On the other hand, some members might arrange their schedules so that they could attend most meetings, but they choose to attend only when the subject matter appeals to them. If they think they have heard it all before, they don't go, because they think they won't get anything out of it. I attend almost all member meetings in New York, and I'm not saying I'm a good boy, because sometimes I can hardly keep myself from saying nonsense. But I go nonetheless. The late Emily Sellon, a prominent theosophist and former vice president of the Society in America, once was asked, "Why do you attend theosophical meetings every week? What do you get out of it?" Her answer was, "It isn't what I get out of it, it's what I can contribute to it." There's the attitude. Now, we don't have to give a lecture to contribute to a theosophical meeting. Some of us are good at that, some of us aren't. Some of those who aren't know a lot more than the ones who give the lectures. Our thoughts are useful. Anyone who does give talks knows they get feedback from the thought of the people in front of them, at least if they're a little sensitive and don't have the hide of a rhinoceros. So that thought helps. Participating in a discussion is a contribution. The expressed thoughts of individuals in the group provide food for thought, even when the ideas seem foolish to us. If we try to understand the fellow member, try to understand, as the modern vernacular has it, where they're coming from, we might realize that there's something behind what they're feebly trying to say. The statement they're making may come from a rigid belief system with which we disagree strongly. Oh, I've been through those. Most of you have also. If so, rather than becoming annoyed with the speaker, which is a sign of blocked desire, I want to hear ideas I agree with. I don't want to hear ideas that I object to. Rather than becoming annoyed, we might learn to state our own view calmly and without feeling any personal animosity, because that animosity will carry in our voice. No doubt about it. It'll be picked up by the other person, and that may produce a fight. Perhaps all human organizations are similar in one respect. Only a few contribute of themselves. Easy to contribute a little money if you have it. Very hard to say, I'll take care of that. I'll be there to open the doors. I'll be there to put the chairs up. Not so many want to do that. In political, social, religious, and spiritual organizations, members often complain, meetings are uninspiring, the subject matter is boring, the charge is always the same. They don't present interesting programs. Who are the they? The few who take on the work. They're the they. Krishnamurti once said, "You are the world." That's something to ponder. At first that made no sense to me. Now it has a profound meaning. In the Theosophical Society, we might truthfully say each member of the society is the Theosophical Society. There is no they, only we, The society is what each of us makes of it. And we often forget the primary purpose of the society is to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity. So easy to experience brotherhood from your armchair. I know someone who is all for brotherhood. That's all this person talks about, and this person is very brilliant and a dear friend. But that person can't get along with a pigeon on the windowsill. A little bit self-deceived, I would say. So nearly every member meeting gives us an opportunity to ponder spiritual principles. Perhaps the presenters are not eloquent. Perhaps they're not well informed. Perhaps they present mistaken notions about what they believe to be true. Yet you and I have an opportunity to present our own understanding of the featured topic. Together we can reach toward those inner states of consciousness where it's possible to get insights into truth, where despite our diverse opinions, there is a deeper unity, even if the meeting occasionally seems boring to the bitter end. We are not there to be entertained. We are there to build the bonds of brotherhood and to contribute what we can either silently by thought or verbally as food for thought. Universal brotherhood cannot be achieved from the bottom up. It is not achieved by acting from an emotional base, even though our emotions may be profoundly affected by it. An awareness of universal brotherhood can only be achieved, I suggest, through a realization of unity at the deepest level, in the deepest states of consciousness, where there is unity. Pondering spiritual principles together is a means toward that liberating end. A sage once said, "It is in giving that we receive." And if we look only to receive, we will, as Christian scripture puts it, be sent empty away. Inner selfishness or spiritual selfishness sparked by desire will have doomed us to failure. And finally, Kutumi has told us that selfishness, the want of self-sacrifice, and egoism are the greatest impediments on the road to adeptship. As we begin to realize how attachment to the objects of our desires is selfish and that it brings pain, we will also begin to free ourselves from it. We may, by so doing, come ever closer to the secret gateway that leads to the reward past all telling, the power to bless and save humanity. Thank you. Is there time for questions? Is that what you're going to do? Okay. And comments?
Hi, Ed. Thanks for coming to Chicago, snowy Chicago. What motivated you to write and talk about this topic?
Personal experience. I frequently say to classes and to audiences when I'm giving a lecture, I'm not talking down to you just because I'm standing on a podium. I'm talking to myself. And I believe that I'm talking to you because I think human beings are a theme and variation. We're really all the same, basically. We have fears, hopes, dreams, philosophies, all of that. And so I see it in myself. And I believe, having looked around, that it's in others. And I think that by pointing it out directly, I'm hoping that each of you in cyberspace and here will look at your own experience, because first we have to see, don't we? If there's a problem and we don't see it, no way of curing it or solving the problem. But once we really see that that's happening in our own experience, there's a possibility we can do something about it and live in a more harmonious and joyful way. So that's what prompted me, my own experience.
Next question. I was wondering if you might share a personal story or talk about when sometimes you feel spiritual selfishness, and then you go and you find out that you've been played for purpose by the universe.
You've been played for a purpose?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think everything that happens to us human beings, I think, is an opportunity to learn. And especially the difficult things, the challenges. I wouldn't think so much the universe is playing me, although ultimately that, of course, is true. But it's my own karma and my own dharma. Those terms, for those not familiar with them, most people know the word karma, meaning action, reaction. But dharma is purpose in life, roughly, again, not completely adequately defined from the Sanskrit. But it seems to me that in each of us, besides that witness, there is some kind of a drive moving us in certain directions that sometimes, now you might call it the universe, in directions that we wouldn't ordinarily have gone. We seem to be forced to move in another direction. And out of that direction, which at first seems very difficult, and we go kicking and screaming, it's a great opportunity. Just one personal example. We moved from one place to another. I'm a little bit, I think I was incarnated from the cat kingdom. I don't like to move. I'm like my home, don't want to move. We were forced to move by some very unfortunate circumstances, psychological, not money-wise. It was very painful. And what came out of it? We now have a midtown loft, 4 blocks north of the Empire State Building in Manhattan, 2,000 square foot of space, 11-foot ceilings, and we feel like we died and went to heaven. And we got it for a small, relatively small amount of money 18 years ago. We couldn't afford to buy it now. It's well over $1.5 million now. We simply could never, we wouldn't even look at it. So that pain brought something, that happened to have been physical, but also I think we learned something. And very often we learn from people who hurt us. And we learn maybe what we did that brought it about. One of our members, now long dead, used to say, "No people, no problems." Yeah. So we're sort of forced in a different way. And I think most of us are not too terribly young. Some are young here, but most of us on the older side. And when you look back at your life, I think sometimes you can find a thread. Maybe you can't enunciate it, but you sort of see. I can see it from childhood, from a very difficult relationship with my father that I've told some of you about. I wasn't physically abused, but it was a dysfunctional family in many ways. And that pain forced me to search. There was no lateral exit for me, none. Zero. The family had no culture. People don't believe this, but it's the truth. None. They existed. They were good people, but they existed. The only exit was this way. So from 4 years old, God was a reality to me, not a belief. It was a presence. Now, I don't understand God anymore as an anthropomorphic being. As Kutumi once said, an old man with a beard sitting on a cloud picking his teeth with lightning. That idea is gone, but that powerful experience is so much greater now. And I am grateful for the difficult times I went through. And I don't think I need to play the violin. You can all play a violin. You can all do the same. You can all find in your own lives, probably, if you look back, things that forced you to learn. So we're sort of driven, in a way, from an inner force.